Good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys doing today? So it was a little bit of a hiccup. So I actually sort of started talking, and I was like going into my introductions. Only if I just realized that uh, I never hit the stream button. So I was talking for 10 minutes and realized nobody could hear me because there's no streaming. How are you guys doing today? Hopefully, you guys are doing well. Let me know if audio sounds good. Just give me a hiccup. What up, teacher? How you doing? Thanks for joining the stream. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I totally agree with your statement about the FX6 and the A7S 3. So, we're actually Max. We're just starting right now. So, we're just starting. Like I said, I realized I didn't hit the start stream button. I thought I did, but apparently I didn't. So that's why. So, thank you guys for joining me today. Like I said, we're going to be talking. Got some really exciting announcements to talk about today, and of course, we are going to be talking about the FX6 announcement. I'm going to give my initial thoughts and reactions. Let me just make sure. Let me guys know you guys can hear me okay in the chat. But it seems like you guys can, since you guys are laughing at me, rightfully so, for messing up the stream key. But yeah, I'm gonna give my thoughts on it. I'm gonna then compare it to the C70. Uh, and basically where I feel how these two are going to correlate. And then I'm going to end with my thoughts on the A7S3. So I have a lot, and that's where I have a lot to say regarding that. So, so that's the gist of today's stream. So let us get started, and we'll go right into just go quick over some of the things that the key highlight features of the FX6 that was announced today, and that is the fact that it is a 4K CMOS 12 megapixel sensor that's double back illuminated, if I remember correctly as well. It will shoot DCI 4K up to 60p, and then it will do UHD 4K up to 120 frames per second. It's going to have, or supposedly, roughly the same dynamic range as the A7S 3. It's going to be using dual CF Express Type A cards, which are backwards compatible to SD cards. So that was the thing that I praised with the Sony A7S 3, and I'm glad to see that here. And then also it is putting in features from the previous FX line, which is dual native ISO, which its native ISO is 800 and 12,800. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Fast autofocus like from the FX9, so it's going to have the great eye detection autofocus. I dabbled a little bit in the Sony FX9 just for like a little workshop, and the autofocus is amazing. I got to give it credit for that. It's a really, really good autofocus. Of course, the big highlight feature I think everybody's excited about, but this has been around the F series cameras, where if it was the Cine Ultra with the FS line, or with this new line with the the FX9, and that is the variable ND filter. This is probably one of the big things and why so many people love these dedicated video cameras from Sony. Because of that, it allows you to transition from very, very high contrast areas, as well as going to like low light areas. So you can go to a bright area to a dark area seamlessly. And then it's going to have the new color science, though I do have to point out the new color science is only in a picture profile, like a Rec 709 picture profile. It's not in log. So you're still going to have to deal with the grading and dealing with the things that you normally have to deal with Sony cameras with S-Log2, S-Log3. And then finally, the price is at $5,900 and I think it was $98, if I remember correctly. So that's the gist of the Sony FX9. Let's go to the chat real quick. I want to understand FX7, the FS7 600 megabits XAVCI 4K 60 Netflix Pro. Is that what the A7S 3 has and what the FX6 is offered? Not exactly. it's not exactly the same, at least on the A7S III. On the FX6, it is. It's the same XF AVCI as the FS7, which is, yes, Netflix approved, but there's so much more to deal with that list of Netflix approved, which honestly, unless you are actually, unless Netflix is cutting the check of the project, unless they're flipping the bill, that list doesn't mean anything. You can shoot on any you can shoot on so many cameras that are not on that list and still get it on Netflix. It's only if Netflix is producing it for their original shows that list happens. But some of the other things that factor in is time code. It has to have a built-in time code. It has to do DCI 4K up to a certain point. It has to have at least 10. There's so many different other factors to getting approved onto that list. And I don't believe the A7S III has what it takes to get on that list. This camera should, because it does have time code. It does have the image quality features that it would need. It does have the bit depth as well. So this should, but so should the C70. I'm not sure if either will be. We will see. So yeah. So Trevor, hey man, what's up? Thanks for joining the channel. The chat. Thanks for joining the chat. Nobody hands out highlights, especially overexposed. I guess you mean handled. Nobody handles highlights, especially overexposed, better than Sony. Well, yeah, I mean, that's true. If you can, but that's also because they kind of have to as well, because unfortunately, if you underexpose it even slightly on Sony cameras, they do not handle noise well at all. So that's one of the reasons why they do handle highlights, which is, again, it's great. But I think it's just, so in that situation, is if you're somebody who's just used to exposing to the right, especially if you're like a photographer, yeah, I can see why these Sony cameras and sort of would appeal to you. However, for someone like me who exposes for highlights, which means maybe possibly slightly underexposing or exposing correctly for skin tones, like I do with my Sony, my R5 and my C200. I can probably eke out close to the same amount of dynamic range as those cameras. It's just, it's all coming down to just understanding the cameras, what are its capabilities, where's strengths at, where's weaknesses, just taking time to understand. Once you do that, honestly, all these cameras are all about the same in terms of their dynamic range. There's some that definitely do better, but they're all roughly in the same ballpark. The upper end of the curve is there. Where else? Yes, totally agree. Totally agree. So what's my initial thoughts about this camera? I think this is going to be a good addition to the market. I think it's a great addition. I think if you're someone who has, like my man Gaston Shutters, who I actually was just talking to him. If you don't know, he's a YouTuber as well. He has his own channel. He does a lot of Sony, talks a lot about Sony. If you haven't seen it, check out his channel as well. But me and him were sort of having a discussion right before I joined, before I started my streaming. And, you know, there's a lot that we agreed on. There's some things we kind of disagreed on. But this is something that fits him perfectly, because I know because I don't know if you saw our previous discussion video, but he was thinking about getting the C70, but his only holdup of the C70 was the fact that it was a Super 35 sensor camera in a full frame ecosystem that was the RF mount. And you know what? I totally get where he was coming from with that. And I totally understand, and especially since he was somebody who has Sony glass, this camera is like perfect for him. It was made for him. It's full frame. He can take full advantage of all his glass, and he doesn't have to adjust anything, and it can work. And it's got a lot of great features. And look, I'll say Sony does a lot of good things about their video lineups that I wish Canon and other manufacturers, especially like Blackmagic, would do, is how they sort of incorporate so many different things from their broadcast, their cinema, into these little things like this camera. The one thing that I bring up is sort of like the zoom rocker. I really wish Canon would come out with a camera that had a zoom rocker as well, just so especially if you're using a gimbal, you can then take the remote, put the rocker on like the side of the handle, and then if you want to, then you can control the zoom. And with the great autofocus, you can do a great you can do the Dolly Zoom effect that a lot of films have been done. Jaws is one of the most infamous shots from Jaws. Uses the Dolly Zoom effect. So that's one of the things, and now you have the ability to put that rocker onto like a handle of a gimbal, and you can do that and get some interesting tracking shots. I think this camera's going to, especially like extreme sports, weddings. I think this camera's going to be a killer. I think the big YouTubers are gonna love this camera. I think they're going to go grab this up in droves because it's small, it's compact enough that they can have their cameramen go in and film them and film the content, whatever they're filming, easily. Extreme sports, again, especially like skateboarding and things like that, when once this whole pandemic sort of comes to an end, I think extreme sports, because now you can be able to get fast moving action like really quickly, especially with that Dolly rocker, that Dolly Zoom rocker. You can go in and punch in and zoom in very quickly, very easily, to make sure you get the framing that you want. And then, of course, there's weddings with the variable NDs, where you're dealing with so many different lighting conditions right off the go. And then, of course, the dual native ISO with 12,800. This is insane. And the cool thing is you could use the 12,800 and then just use the variable ND to drop it down if it's too bright, and you get roughly the same exposure range. So, excuse me, I see a lot of potential with this camera, personally, and I'm really eager to see. I'm personally invested to the EF RF system, and where I want to go with my career involves the EF and PL. So the C70 makes the sense. I'm still getting the C70, but I think for those that are really into the Sony ecosystem, I think this camera is going to be fantastic for them. Let's see here. Let's go to chat and see where everybody is. This is probably the only camera that would keep me from buying the C70 as an entry-level cinema camera. I can totally see that, but like I said, and I'll get to the C70 in a bit when I just start talking a little bit more about it. But I can totally see why some people would consider the C70. I personally feel I think each one of these are going to have a bit, but let me not stop because I don't want to spoil that subject. We'll get to that in a second. I just want to check the chat real quick. I would still get this S1H over either because you're getting great IS. I can totally see that. If image stabilization is a big deal for you, I could totally see why the S1H would be the better option. However, I would still rather have built-in NDs than IS, because I can always take a gimbal that will do better than IS in pretty much every practicality. A gimbal will still be better, stabilizer will still be better, and gimbals are getting small and compact enough that I can see the value in that. I would rather take a camera that has built-in NDs and professional audio inputs over, say, something IBIS. But that's me personally. Trevor, I know you are definitely an S1H supporter, and I totally get, especially for image stabilization, especially if you really want to go more handheld, I can totally understand that. The C70 might be a Super 35, but the ratio is 1:3 when compared to Sony full-frame sensor. Yes, true. So, again, I'll go right into it. They should just start putting IBIS on everybody. I don't agree with that. Trevor, because I'm going to tell you, a lot of cinematographers, while IBIS it's shown some benefits, it's also it becomes a lot more cumbersome once you start making floating sensors. And I would much rather have a stable sensor that's locked in place and use a gimbal, because no matter how good the IBIS is, it will never beat a gimbal. It will never beat a stabilizer. So I would rather if I'm looking for the best potential in terms of stabilization, I would rather work with sticks and gimbals and stabilizers more so than just using IBIS, because there's just a lot of math. I would rather have something that's analytical, that's physical, that's actually physical and working with it. So, and I know a lot of cinematographers that would hate it if their cameras came with IBIS, because there's just, you always get those micro jitters. Even if you turn the camera, even if you turn the IBIS off, you will still get it even with the gimbal systems. So I know that was one of the reasons why the GH5S didn't have IBIS. It's because a lot of the DPs were like, yeah, we would rather just use a gimbal. As good as the IBIS is, we would still rather use a gimbal for that. But it depends on the shot. I know, me personally, as interesting as handheld, I personally would just have stability. So let's move on to sort of the going against the C70, and what I will say about the C70 is this. Is that what I feel like with both of these cameras is that they're going to be equal footing. So in regards to the C70, I'm sorry, the FX6, it's a full frame sensor compared to the dual native ISO. It's a full frame sensor with dual native ISO. So I personally think the FX6 is going to be a better low light camera, because if it was just a full frame, I don't know. I think they would be on par, because the C70 has even though it's Super 35, it has that DGO technology, which it gives it really, really clean noise. But the dual native ISO is what, especially as high as that second gain circuit is, the native ISO being 12,800, that sort of changes that to me sort of changes, like pushes the FX6. Again, I don't know, because I haven't had either camera, but if I had to take a guess, just based on physics and based on how, based on what I understand with sensor technology, the FX6 will more likely be the better low light camera. It's going to have a variable ND filter compared to the C70's analog filter. And for the most part, that's going to give an advantage. Now, again, you got to remember, you're still talking about electronics. So if the electronics were to ever go, you're kind of SOL. But I've only heard like maybe that happened like one or twice with all the different Sony cameras that have came out. I've only heard of that issue happening like once or twice. So it's very unlikely that that would be the case. And besides, you still have an analog ND filter if in that case. But the thing that's going to be sort of the deciding factor for both of these cameras is going to be the RF mount. The mount system. And your lens. The lenses are going to basically, for me at least, they're going to dictate where people are going to move to. If you're committed and got Sony glass, then you are probably going to go with the FX6. It just totally makes sense. Their whole ecosystem works around that E-mount system. They got a whole different thing. So that's the thing I've always credited Sony. It's like, and you've heard me talk about this multiple times. What Sony did so well with their mount system is that they started from where you can go from the beginning with their crop sensor camera all the way up to their full frame flagship cinema camera. You can go all the way up that whole ecosystem and use the same mount, so you can use the same glass. So the savings you make over time, at least in terms of glass, as you transition your way up in your filming career, it's the most sense. The only drawback is that you really have to be liking the ecosystem that Sony has built, because unfortunately, nobody has really adopted what I considered a good, solid alternative with the E-mount system. I know Confinity has an E-mount option, but it's just like, it's metal. It's just a metal mount. There's no electronics, so there's no way for lenses to talk to one another. So any sort of dual IS with lens stabilization and IBIS talking, that's out the window. Autofocus definitely out the window. So that's one of the big things for me, at least, is that there's no way for lens and cameras to talk, except unless you are in the Sony ecosystem. Whereas with Canon, even if you are going with their RF mount system, there are other people that are adapting that mount system. Red, I mean, look at Red. Red has the Komodo out right now, and the Komodo is now essentially using the RF mount systems, which allows them to also put it in D filters as well. So you got cameras that can even though I think the Komodo right now still can't talk to RF lenses natively, which again is weird, but people are adapting. And you still got the EF mount, which is the most popular mount system, where no matter where there's alternatives. Like you can go to the Sony mount and still adopt EF mounts, though you can't really take advantage of the autofocus as you would using a Canon camera. But in terms of EF mounts, you got Red, of course. Ari just announced on their Alexa Mini LF that an EF mount option. You have Confinity, Blackmagic, they all offer EF mounts. So if you're investing even if you're investing in EF mount EF glass, you're still getting the full advantage of the EF glass on the RF mount cameras like the C70. So it really comes down to, are you committed to the Sony E-mount system, or if you want to look elsewhere in terms of glass. If you're not committed to that EF glass system, which I also have to say, they're also kind of dated at this point, because a lot of the glass that came out from Sony, they were designed for like 4K, but now everything's pushing with higher resolutions. Now the glass are sort of showing their age, but that's fine especially if you want like softness on your lens, on your images. And then the final thing is that the C70 is a little bit smaller than the FX6, and it's $500 less. So honestly, I think there's going to be people fighting, but honestly, if you have Sony glass, you're going to get the FX6. I think people that have a good long array of Sony glass are going to get the FX6. If you got either EF or RF glass, you're going to go with the C70, because the ecosystems are built and work with those mounts and those cameras. So outside of that, like I said, I think both of these cameras are going to make a killing in the market. Let's go to chat for a second. The C70 might be oh, yeah, we already did that one. Let's see here. I've had a gimbal for a year and used it once. Personally, I pulled the trigger on the C300 Mark III. It still looks like the best choice for a new buyer when it comes to running gun documentary work. Everything is moving quickly. The C300, look, and the C300 Mark III is, it's still going to be an amazing camera. I think for a lot of people, that's a camera that, especially if you're looking to get into to get a serious professional body cinema camera. Not that the C70 isn't a professional body. I think it's just, obviously, there's just so much more functionality with the C300 Mark III, and you still got Cinema Raw Light, which obviously the C70 doesn't have. You got better future-proof media cards with CF Express, which is why Sony built the CF Express Type A cards, so they can future-proof their cameras. So, again, we're seeing. I think I agree. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more future-proof, but you don't need the higher resolutions, you want to stick to the 4K, I think the C300 Mark III is going to be a great option. It has great low light capabilities. It's great dynamic range, and you can still modify it and build it out and make it like a really big workhorse. Trevor, more people than not that I know of want it, so I would include it as a default with the option to swap it out. Okay, I guess I can see that. I just know personally everybody that I've talked to that is a working DP, they pretty much said, IBIS is nice, but they would rather use a gimbal. Me personally. C70. So, organism. What buttons? Curious, what buttons would you feel is missing from the C70 that for you to move quickly compared to the C300 Mark III? I'd love to hear that. So that was the C70. Let's talk. All right, let's talk about, obviously we read all these specs and something came to mind. It's like, this looks a lot like the A7S III. In fact, this looks exactly like the A7S III, but in an actual video camera body. So, and that is very, very, very true. Yeah, this is pretty much the A7S III in an actual video camera body. I gotta tell you, I had a good laugh because I remember so many times that I would bring up when the A7S III was not even announced yet, that, at least, I'm sorry, when it was announced, that I was looking at it like, oh, it's a good solid camera, but there's nothing really, I was like, but there's nothing really extraordinary that if, for say, Sony was to release either a new alpha camera or what they did today, come with a video camera that does similar capabilities, it kind of diminishes the value of the A7S III, like, repeatedly. And that's how I feel about it today. I'm like, honestly, the A7S III, I know people are still haven't got that camera. But honestly, if I was someone who ordered the A7S III and I just got it in, and this, like I said, this is where me and Gaston totally disagree. And that's fine. That's fine. I know me personally, if I was somebody that bought the A7S III and then I got it and then this came out and I read those specs, I would be pissed. Because essentially, for $2.5, again, it's almost double the price of the A7S III. So I know some people are going to look at price and say, ugh. But understand, you could spend just $1,000 alone on ND filters just to get the same equivalence of what you could do with this FX6. And then let's not bring in the audio, which you would have to spend more money on to get that, to get the audio adapter. And then all these other pieces will pile up. And you still don't get features like a false color, a proper waveform monitor, but you get everything that's what was great about the A7S III. You still get that in this camera. So if I'm somebody who is like, if it was looking between the A7S III and the FX6, and I'm only going like, I'm only getting one option. I'm only going to get one. I would totally ditch the A7S III and get the FX6 because I don't see a reason of getting the FX. I don't see very little reasons to get the A7S III over the FX6. The only reason there's only really two reasons I think of that somebody would still want to have an A7S III after this announcement. And that is to be, and this isn't obviously, I think what Gaston's point was, it was a B camera in case of a multicam shoot. You got cameras that basically are identical to each other. You can use the A7S III as a B camera for like multicam shoots. And I totally see that. That is until the A7 IV comes, and the A7 IV comes out, and because right now it's rumored to do 4K 60. So yeah, I won't do 4K 120, but I don't need that. I got the FX6. So if it does that, if that is oversampling 4K, and if that's oversampling 4K, kind of like how the FX9 is doing, it's okay. And you're getting a better stills camera on top of that, and odds are it's going to cost less than an A7S III. I don't know. I would honestly, because we know the A7 IV is coming. There's already been rumors about the A9S and how that's possibly even doing 8K. So, yeah, for me, the value of the A7S III is like, I was laughing. I gotta go lie. I was laughing because so many people were talking smack about the R5, and I was just like, just wait. Yeah, but it may not be perfect, but the R5 is a great camera. But more importantly, it's going to hold its value for quite a while. It didn't take Sony more than 3 months to diminish the value of the A7S III. Personally, me. And then the final thing is that the only real thing to me about the A7S III is that it's easier to sort of get into to film in areas you probably may not be able to, or you may have issues filming in. It may be a little bit easier to do that with the A7S III. In that sense, that's really the only thing I can think of. Because if you look at, let me pull up the stills. Because if you look at the body of this, this is still a very compact camera that can basically, I can put in the satchel, in like my brown satchel. I can still put that in there in all of its parts and go out and film. So going around and filming is not going to be hard at all with this camera. And then, the only other thing is that it's $2,500 cheaper than the A7S. And which, again, that's a big thing. But, again, how much money are you saving when you can save money on NDs, rigging, and audio equipment? And also, again, when the A7 IV comes out, and if it does do, even if it just does 4K 60, but it offers 10-bit, it does all the 10 bits, it offers the same dual card, memory cards, it's still a flip-out screen, it offers everything that the A7, it offers most of what the A7S offers. Maybe not everything, maybe not 4K 120, but offers roughly the same of what the A7S does, maybe not as good as low light. Why would that not be a better option, especially if it comes out cheaper? So this is, I just thought it was just very, very entertaining that this came out. People are still waiting to get their A7S. I'll tell you right now, I'm going to say, if I was an owner, I would be kind of irate, because it's like, I just dropped $3,500 and now there's a camera that's a better video camera and it's the same thing. Personally. All right. Let's go to the chat real quick. Trevor, has Canon updated their cinema lens lines yet? The last update the last lens lineup they did was the Sumeris, which are sort of more of like a vintage style lens lookup. But the C70s the cinema lines are still very good. Obviously, they don't take a lot of the higher resolutions, but there are 5 lines ups and also there's new lenses that are coming out, like the Irix, that can deal with 8K, that can do 8K resolution, and they're quite affordable lenses. So there's a lot of options, and it comes in the EF mount territory as well. So, but that is a good point, Trevor. I think Canon needs to fit. I think Canon cinema lenses probably need some sort of upgrade. I just don't know what exactly yet, because let's be clear, they were one of the first to actually adopt a full frame lens setup. None of their lenses are Super 35. They're all designed for full frame in terms of their cinema lenses. So we'll see that. Awesome. Hey man, what's up? Thanks for joining the chat. I like the C70's body more than the FX6. I would 100% buy the full frame version of the C70 regardless of the price. See, and you know what? Let's see if Canon will see. I don't know if Canon watches my streams, but hopefully, Osme, they take in what you're saying, because yeah, I think a lot of people would. I know a lot of people, like I said, Gaston was ready to go right in. My buddy Gaston, he was ready to go in and get the C70. The only thing that was holding him back was the full frame. Had they released a full frame version, he probably would have got it and stick with it. But probably not. We'll find out, because I'm actually going to be talking with him again. Me and him are sort of trying to put together a discussion video similar to what we did about the C70 about a month or so back. We're doing another discussion video about the FX9, so I'll probably talk to him about it, and we'll see. We're looking to try to get that, to shoot that tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. But I will definitely, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a post up on my channel. And if there's questions where you can put your questions out, then maybe you can just talk to each one of us, send to one of us when we start shooting, so we can sort of give you guys our thoughts on that. So keep an eye out for that post. Let's see here. So, Trevor, Sony and most other companies are just treating their hybrid market and cinema market as two different target audiences. They don't see two cameras as competing. I don't know if I agree with that, because if that was the case, then how come Sony doesn't put out a 6K sensor? Or they have a 6K cameras, but how come they don't put cameras out that shoot 6K? or because there's a lot of I see them as sort of they see it. I will say this: I think they see them more as working together, and I think Canon's sort of going along that. It's now finally coming along that mentality of as well as they're working to work alongside each other, but I think where they different is Canon sort of builds their cameras more specifically to very specific audiences, so so you can see where each camera better fits, where Sony kind of just puts the same stuff together and puts it out. But I guess, again, for me, I kind of just see, like, I don't see the point of getting, at least me personally, I don't see the point of getting an A7S III if I can get an FS6, which it's not that bigger. It's not that much bigger. I mean, yeah, it's definitely bigger, but it's not that much heavier. And I mean, it's light enough that you can put it on one-handed gimbals, especially a lot of the current gen gimbals that are out right now. There's very little, again, except for like where it's like unless there's places like you really don't want to be seen carrying like what looks to be an actual cinema camera. There, I could see that being a problem. And that's, I think, something where the C70 actually gives a bit more benefits, because the C70 just looks like a DSLR. So if I was to walk around with it, I could walk around, it just looks like a DSLR. I could just look like a tourist, but I'm actually filming. So in that case, the C70 is sort of a bit of benefits because it's a little bit easier to sort of, oh no, I'm just taking photos. Really, I have a full-blown professional video camera. So Leo Bardo, what's the major benefits of full-frame sensors? So the general benefits, and obviously this varies because it depends on the technology. There's so many variables, but the general like baseline benefits of a full-frame sensors are they can allow more light in, so they typically have better noise performance. They give you shallower depth of field, so if you're looking for something where you can get a much more creamier, smoother backgrounds, as well as smoother bokeh, that's one of the benefits of a full frame sensor. You don't have to open it so wide and allow so much light in to get that sort of effect. The other thing is it's they don't allow as much noise because they can take more photo sites. And then also the field of view is wider. You get a wider field of view, which does give a different aesthetic purposes. Now, obviously, you can go with wider lenses, but the lenses, you can go with wider lenses, but you're never taking full advantages, because all lenses, even Micro Four Thirds, are sort of, the metric is the standard metric is full frame. So they're sort of building them around being equivalent to full frame. But essentially, full frame is the standard for, at least for it's based from a photography standpoint. But outside of that, there isn't that much benefits between something, say, a Super 35 and a full frame, because again, even the benefits I brought up, they can be affected. Like for example, the C500 Mark II is a full frame 6K sensor. The C300 Mark III is a Super 35 4K sensor. From everybody that I've talked to personally and people that videos I've seen, the C300 Mark III, the 4K Super 35 sensor, has better noise performance, and that is because of its dual gate output sensor technology, which the C500 doesn't have. Now, the C500 still does well because it's suppressing a lot of the noise from its 6K when you're recording in 4K, but just from a pure sensor technology, the C70, I guess it's the C70 as well, but mainly the C500 Mark II is producing a cleaner noise. So it's sort of varied, but those are typically the variants that you get with a full frame camera. Trevor, I know tons of photographers who also shoot video, and FXs just had no use for them. They can afford it, but there's no point. So yeah, I guess hybrid shooters, yeah, if you're a hybrid shooter, yeah, I can totally see why that may not make sense to you. But for someone like, but I'm looking at it just purely from a video perspective. I'm not really including the photography side of it from just purely from a video perspective. I see at least why I don't see why I would personally go with the Sony A7S III. Again, these are just my opinions. This is from my perspective. The benefits of owning just purely from a video shooter, exclude the photography side. Purely from a video shooter, I don't see the benefit of the A7S over the FX6, personally. And yeah, I agree with Osmi. And if you're going just from a hybrid standpoint, the R5 would still to me be the better option, personally, because you got the higher stills. You still got the higher megapixels for stills. You still got great continuous autofocus, fast frames per second autofocus, and you get great video along with it. But again, I think it's just. But honestly, again, it comes down to ecosystem. I think what's going to it'll be interesting to see what Sony comes with their new A9, supposedly what's coming with the A9, and what is supposedly coming with the FX6. Because to me, if you're looking at it from a hybrid standpoint, I think if what we're hearing about those cameras are true, those to me will be better hybrid cameras, much more so than the A7S. And again, once you have that, and then you have the FX6 as well, I'm somebody who sees, I'm a type of person that's always feels you need at least two. If you're doing video, you always need at least two, because there's never a perfect camera. There is no perfect camera, so you need a secondary camera to sort of fit in the parts that are missing from the A camera. So to just give you that give you dynamic, that yin to the yang. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I'm always somebody that's looking at a two-camera system. And if I'm looking at a two-camera system, if I got the FX6, why would I get something that is literally the same as the FX6 when I can get something like either an A9, the new A9, or the new A7 IV that, yeah, it's not going to be identical, and maybe there's some benefits that I'll lose from like the A7 IV, but it's cheaper, and I'm definitely going to get more usage out of the stills part if I'm doing hybrid shooting. And I am also probably getting additional features that I don't get, like oversampling to 4K. Those are my thoughts. I went on the ground, missed my answer. Let's see, what was your... Okay, so you were asking about the the FX6 compared to the FS7. So, in terms of Netflix. Okay, I think what I basically said, Max, was in terms of the A7S III, there's a lot of different things. It's not just about the megabits. There's so many different things that go into a Netflix approved. It's needing of time code, of actual time code. It's a DCI option. There's certain megabits. Yes, there's 10-bit. You need to do 10-bit in a log format or 16-bit raw linear. In theory, the A7S, but the big problem with the A7S III and why it won't get approved is because it doesn't have a time code. Now, Trevor knows this. The S1H has its flash also behaves as a time code. Now, Trevor, you can answer this better than me. I didn't really get a chance to use the time code when I had the S1H to try out, but I've heard it's very similar to the GH5S's time code, which I did have, and the problem with that is it went out of sync like after like 10 minutes. But for some reason, it has that time code in, so because of that, it got approved on Netflix. I don't know if this will be, but honestly, as I mentioned at the top, unless Netflix is cutting the check, that Netflix list doesn't mean squat. I can shoot on the Canon R5, and I guarantee you this is not Netflix approved, but I can shoot a movie on the R5 if my story is good, if my story and my film is good, if it makes noise around Sundance and I can go around and get some attraction, or if I have connections with Netflix, I can get a camera that I can get what I filmed on this on Netflix. The whole Netflix list only matters if they're producing it for their original content. If they're not, you can get it on Netflix. It doesn't take, you don't need the camera on this list to get approved. But based on what I'm saying, I don't believe the A7S is going to be approved because of the time code. I do expect the FX6 to be approved for its time, because it does have time code. It does have basically, it has all the video features it would need to get on that list. If you were looking at that, I'm pretty sure this will be approved. Just like I believe the C70 will eventually be approved for Netflix. Hopefully that answered your question, Max. Yeah. Hey, Carlos, what's up, man? Thanks for joining, man. Exactly. As Carlos basically said, that list only matters if you are if Netflix is actually cutting the check of the project. If they're not cutting the check for their original, it's for their original content, the list doesn't matter. So again, unless you are working with, if you're working with Netflix, then yes, this would obviously matter to you. But if not, don't worry about the list. Just make good content. Just make a good film or a good or whatever video project you're working on. Just make a good film and let it get noise, make connections. You'll get it on Netflix. So that's why. So let's see here. Is the FS finally 10-bit? Is the A7S finally 10-bit? Yeah, so the A7S, yeah, it's 10-bit. And in fact, so it can do 16-bit raw out. This is one of the things I don't like about Sony's marketing. It's very misleading. It's not, but it's not. So let me explain. So the 16-bit raw, it is true. It does put 16-bit raw out. The problem is twofold. One, there's no monitor that can take a 16-bit. Atomos doesn't have a recorder that can take 16-bit, so you can't really take advantage of the 16-bit. It will just conform it to 12-bit. But the part two is, and most likely this really goes to Apple ProRes RAW, is that even if Atomos makes a 16-bit monitor, it will still get conformed to a 12-bit system because ProRes RAW is a 12-bit codec. It's not designed to be 16-bit. So it doesn't matter. It's still good. So even if you take it out and the monitor can record 16-bit, unless Apple updates ProRes RAW or offers a new alternative version of ProRes RAW that can take 16-bit, it's still going to get conformed to 12-bit. So yeah, all that 16-bit sounds nice, but it's going to be, I'll tell you, in terms of color depth, the A7S 3 does no more better colors than the R5 with 8K RAW. It does the same 12-bit, it has the same color depth. When you ultimately put it in your projects, you're getting the same color depth. There's not much difference. And so yeah, but it does have 10-bit. It does have 10-bit 422 in terms of the A7S 3. It does have 10-bit. The FX6, which is based off the FX5, that's been updated to 10-bit 422, which is great because before you had to go either to the FS7, which was like anywhere between $8,000 to $10,000, and then recently the FX9, which is again $10,000. Those where you had to go to get the 10-bit, but now you can get 10-bit off of this little guy, so that's a great thing. So let's go back to the chat. Trevor, I don't know how good the jamming is, ours if it drifts. Okay, yeah. I just want to know because I know when I had the GH5S, the time code would drift. I would notice that because I did 3 projects with it when I had the GH5S, and it after 10 or 15 minutes it would drift. So, but it's something, like I said, it's something to keep an eye out if you're planning to. It's something to keep an eye out. Just want to mention that. I mean, yeah, Osmin. Oh, okay, hey, what's up, man? Sorry, I meant okay. Yeah, this is, yeah, it's one of the things that it's a love-hate thing I have with Sony. I love the fact that they give you so much stuff to offer, but I don't like the fact that it's pretty much useless. Like, up until the A7S 3, S-Log3 on alpha cameras was completely useless. Yeah, it was cool that they gave it to us, but what's the point of it when all the cameras were 8-bit and they can't handle the S-Log3's gamma curve, which is designed to be for 10-bit and above. So I'm glad that now that S-Log3 has, you got a 10-bit option in the A7S III and now in the FX9. It's great that you can take advantage of it. I just, again, with the 16-bit RAW, I'm like, yeah, it's cool. You get 16-bit RAW, but you can't do anything with the 16-bit RAW. It's just going to conform to 12-bit. You're just going to, so, yeah. What's the weight? Let's find out. Give me a second. Let's see what we can find out in terms of the weight. Come on. So, if I remember correctly, it's very, very light. So, the weight, let's see here. Okay, so the weight is 890 grams, or oops, sorry, wrong one. Let me cut to here. All right, here we go. So it's 890 grams or 2 pounds. It's only, so 2 pounds. There's some lenses that are not even that don't even weigh, that weigh more than that. So that's so this is a very, very, very light camera. Leobardo, is the C70 future-proof? I won't say, I don't think it's future-proof, honestly. I don't, because the C70 is great, and the C70 is great for right now. Now, most of the film and video industry is still in Super 35. A lot of the glass that people are going to use is Super 35. Super 35 is going to be here for a while, but because a lot of the big boys, especially Ari, Red's been in full frame for a while, but now that Ari has moved to full frame, so many people are now moving to full frame, and full frame is going to be the way to go for the future. And also, higher resolutions are going to go. The resolution race hasn't stopped. It's going to go. I mean, obviously, if this is the case, otherwise Blackmagic would not put out a 12K resolution camera. The resolution race is still going to go. I think the next, because especially since you got monitors that are already coming out that are 8K. Blackmagic has spent a whole lot of R&D on their broadcast side to allow you to deliver broadcast 8K. So 8K is going to be the direction everybody's going to. Full frame is going to be the direction everybody's going to. Is this after that? I don't know. But in terms of like the here and now, the C70 is great. But I personally wouldn't say it's future proof. I think you'll get a good amount of years with it, but eventually, again, we're going to go to the full. People are going to start moving to a full frame format, and people are going to start moving to higher end formats, and people already are. So, Leobardo, if I had to answer your question, I would have to say no. It's not future proof. I guess the FX6 would be a little bit more future proof than the C70 because it is a full frame camera, but it's still only rocking a 4K sensor. And I know that seems silly. It's like it's only a 4K sensor because 4K is the standard now, but it's not fully future. I don't think that is fully future proof, but I will say it's more future proof than the C70. I see the C70 sort of as a transitional camera. So it's the C70 is what you use for a couple years. Maybe then you go to another camera. Maybe you go to the C300. Maybe you go, if you're going to go the full frame route, the C500 Mark II. The C500 Mark II is like the future-proof camera that Canon has. And then I guess to a lesser extent, the R5 in terms of their mirrorless mounts, in terms of their mirrorless cameras, the R5 is the future-proof camera because it has the high resolution, it has the full frame. So you can do a lot of content for years and years to come with the R5. Same thing with the C500 Mark II. So, Max, purely buying R5 for 120 frames per second. I only shoot 10 seconds, takes intervals of 10 minutes. Camera can be turned off. Will the 120 frames 4K from the FX, will it lack? Can we see the difference? I think is it going to be a difference? Yeah. I mean, from what I understand, this is almost the exact same sensor as the A7S III. Now, the A7S III has been shown to have slightly better 120 frames per second, but is it such a noticeable difference from what I have seen? No. And look, the matter is, at least, is the 120 frames per second on the R5 good? The answer is yes. It's absolutely good. It's absolutely phenomenal. But it is using pixel binning, whereas the FX6 is going to be using just the full sensor. It doesn't need to do any sort of number crunching to condense it to a sensor, to a 4K sensor. It's already a 4K sensor. So, in theory, yes, it will be, especially since it also has a dual native ISO system. The FX6 will be, I think it will be a better 120 frames per second than the R5, simply because it's using the full sensor and you don't need to do any pixel binning, and for the fact that of that dual native ISO. It's going, I think, for different lighting conditions, along with the variable ND, it's going to be better for the 120 frames per second. But is it going to be a noticeable difference? That I can't answer. I don't know if it will be a noticeable difference. I do think it will be better. I just don't think it will be so much better, because I think, for me personally, the R5's 120 frames per second is just fantastic for me personally. Carlos says FX6 is not future-proof because Sony will release a new camera in a few months. I mean, look, at the rate they're going, that may very well be true, man. That may very well be true. But honestly, Carlos, I don't think Sony's going to. I don't know how much more future-proof can they be unless they go like 4K 200 frames. Because until they update the Venice, maybe they'll put out a new sensor for the Venice that will shoot 8K. But until that happens, Sony's not going to get a camera that's going to touch the Venice. So I don't see them doing that anytime soon. So, but at the same time, it is definitely not future-proof, because again, Sony will update their cameras and sort of devalue their cameras probably much sooner than Canon. But to me, we got to see what they do with the Venice first, because I don't see Sony like putting out a high-resolution camera until they've updated that Venice sensor. Osmin, speaking about the R5, what are your expectations regarding the upcoming firmware? Honestly, what I'm hoping for is being the big thing. If what's the latest rumors are true, that it's not only they're going to have Canon Log 3, but they're also going to have Canon Log 2. I know Carlos is in chat, and I know he talks about the R5 and how the R5 already has Canon Log 2 in it, and it does. If you shoot RAW, it does. But my only thing is, I would like to see it when I'm monitoring it with the camera. You can't, it's especially since you don't have a waveform, you don't have false color in the camera, you can't input LUT, so you can maybe create a fake false color look. So you're kind of at the mercy of the exposure and sort of knowing how Canon Log 2 works and Canon Log 3 behaves, and just properly exposing for Canon Log and then correcting it in post. I would love it if if the rumors are Canon Log 2 are true. That means most likely that we also get the C Canon Log 2. And if we get the C Canon Log 2, that's the thing I'm going to be immensely happy for, because then we got our control of the camera back. We can definitely, it's going to be much easier to expose with the camera. That's the number one thing I'm looking for. I know Cinema Raw Light is coming, and so the The more compressed files are going to be a little bit nicer because it does work a lot. Cinema Raw Lite works better than the full Canon Raw in terms of DaVinci Resolve. But the thing I'm really hoping for now, there's no news about this. This is sort of just hopeful dreaming, is that they will offer the APS-C crop form in RAW, but it will be 5.1K, which is basically the sensor resolution you're using at that when it oversamples to 4K. I'm hoping they'll give us access to the RAW version of that in Cinema Raw Lite, because now we got another alternative option that we can do. And then on top of that, I can then put a speed booster, maybe put like one of Canon's, the Canon's focal reducer onto the camera, because they did say it does work with the R5 in their recent interview with Pro AV TV. But you're just going to lose the depth of field, which I'm fine. I don't mind losing the depth of field. But having that additional light source and then giving that full frame look, I think that's going to be sweet. Those are the things. Yeah, really, the things I've been saying, the things I want, but from what I read, it's not going to happen. Remove the 30-minute record limit. There is talk about they're going to give more codec options for the R5 as well, for like non-RAW. So non-RAW, there's getting some more codec options. I hope they bring XF-AVC in there. That would be, yeah, XF-AVC. I hope they bring that in. I will lose my mind if they did that. I really want them to put shutter angle in there, because Trevor, I don't know if Trevor's still in the chat, but I'm envious of Trevor in regards to the S1H, because they give you shutter angle as an option. I really wish Canon would do that. So remove the 30-minute record limit, give us shutter angle, and what was the other one I said? The other codec options that is not H.265. So XF-AVC. Now of those three, XF-AVC seems to be something they are working on. So hopefully that answers your question. Carlos, the conversation about better needs to shift to delivery platforms, because better with, say, IG compression doesn't matter. Yeah, so I think that's, again, that is something you got to definitely consider. Where's the delivery platform? Where are you delivering it to? If you're delivering it to YouTube, if you're delivering it to Instagram, if those are the areas, if you're delivering it for the web, yeah, I think in terms of future proofing, in terms of that it's not as in demand for like higher resolutions or higher frame rates and full frame. But if you are going for something for bigger projects, if you're going for Netflix, especially if you're going for Netflix, if you're going to like Amazon, or you're going to like try to do some like theatrical releases, if we ever get theatrical releases again in Dolby Vision, yeah, all this stuff, then you got to factor in the needs. It all comes down to the needs of the project. But honestly, cameras are so good now, there's no excuses why you can't go out and create good content. There's no excuses. Stephanie, hey, what's up, Stephanie? Thanks for joining the channel. What does the FX6 I guess what's Canon's version of the FX6? That would the C70. The C70 would be the closest representation of the FX6. Max, you're breaking my heart. I was so set on R5 120. Can Sony lower data rates really beat R5? This is confusing. Please do test. I mean, if I get the FX6, and you guys, if that's something you guys definitely want to see, sure, I'll do a comparison test. I'm actually getting with a couple of my friends, trying to do a comparison test with the Ursa Mini, because they have Ursa Mini Pros, and I'm going to probably bring my C200 along and try to do some comparison tests with that as well. So it's just a matter, because both of us are doing different things, so it's just a matter of just being able to find time to just get together and just go ahead and go ham on those comparisons. But we shall see. Carl time. All right, Carlos, thanks for stopping by, man. I really appreciate it. But yeah, Trevor knows exactly what I'm talking about with shutter angle. That's the one thing I wanted to see. But it's not necessarily, again, it's how the Kodak works. So yeah, the data rates definitely help, But it's sort of like, well, how much of it does it help and how much does it become a hindrance? Again, everything is variable. In theory, yes, more data you have, the better it is if you're going to really push the grades. But if you're not pushing the grades that hard, the laws of diminished returns in terms of data rates sort of show itself when you're going up higher in data rates. Hopefully that helps, Max. But I think this is it. If there is no other questions, I think this has been a really great discussion. I thank you all for joining me here. It's been a wonderful discussion. You know me. I'm not one camera person. I don't favor one camera over another. If I see something that I think is going to be good, I think it's good. If there's some issues with the camera, I will bring it out. None of these camera manufacturers are paying me, so I will say something. I will say how I feel about it. But honestly, I think the FX6, it's going to really be a major player for this camera market, and I am really, really looking forward to it. Before we go, though, I kind of want to put a chat just for an over-under. Because, again, I think I talked about it a little bit, but I didn't really dive into it. Canon and Sony have been doing this cat and mouse thing so Canon announced the R5, and then when Canon releases the R5, Sony announces the A7S III. When Sony announces the A7S III, shortly after that, Canon announces the C70. And then when the C70 gets released, Sony announces the FX6. So now, I'm thinking we may see that R5 firmware update in the next 24 to 48 hours. I would not be surprised if all of a sudden Canon's like, all right, let's release that firmware update that we've been working on. So let's have a little fun. Over, under. How many of y'all think we will have the R5 firmware update announcement by midnight tonight? Because usually they like to drop this stuff late in the evening, obviously because they're up in Japan. So give me you guys over under of Canon all of a sudden releasing a firmware update by midnight tonight. Stephanie, is the Sony better than the C70? Everyone on YouTube is going, look, let's be clear. A lot of these people have been building, I don't want to say people have bias. I don't think people are bought and paid for it, because then you're questioning people's ethics and morals. And I don't know people, and I don't have enough evidence to have that way one way or the other. All I will say is, understand, they're all signed NDAs, and they all can't release them until all at the same time. So yeah, you're probably noticed like 15 different videos about the FX9 that and they're all talking about the same exact thing. My thing is wait. I always say wait. I don't believe one or the other is better. And I'm telling you right now, don't worry if one or the other is better. Because honestly, they're basically much on equal footing. The only thing you should be worried about is what is your ecosystem, what is your workflow, and find the camera that best fits your workflow. And really, this comes down to the lenses. If you're someone that has a bunch of EF lenses or a bunch of RF lenses, go C70. There's no benefit of going over to the FX. To me, there's not that much of a benefit on the FX6 to switch your whole ecosystem over. And if you're somebody like my buddy Gaston, who's heavily invested in the Sony ecosystem, go with this FX6. I don't see what the benefits that I see from the C70 don't outweigh the benefits of the ecosystem that you're already in. So I always say is, look at where you are right now, look at where you want to go, and then see which camera sort of will best help you that way. Because honestly, these cameras are pretty much identical. You're not going to go wrong. Your content isn't going to suck because you went with the C70 instead of the FX6. Just find the camera that you're happy with. Max, wow. Osme, take them enough camps and give them enough products for reviews, and there will always be bias. I'll keep quiet on that because again, I don't know the interactions between them, between a lot of these YouTubers. All I know is I will put it in my hands before I give full reviews and give full things on it. And when I have a considerable amount of time, you notice I didn't drop my R5 review. If you haven't seen my R5 review, I released it like 2 weeks ago, and you can go to the channel and check it out if you haven't seen it yet. I released it because I wanted good ample time to try it. Because had I just done what everybody else did, I probably would have. If I done what everybody else did, which is just done a week with the R5 and then just give my review, especially since a lot of them were using the production one, and then because they're always going to get new cameras and they're going to new cameras, they never really fully revisit these cameras. So a lot of people just take those things as fact. I'm like, I tell people all the time, just wait till the dust settles and see where it folds. I think the FX6 is going to be a great solid camera if you're in the Sony ecosystem. Is it enough to convince you to go into it? For some people that are not decided, or maybe they don't have full benefits yet, maybe. But for me, I would rather take all the benefits of owning an RF or even an EF glass and use it on the C70 than maybe trying to make it work with a Sony camera. That's just me personally. So, again, yeah, so everybody's going to go nuts. Guess what? There's going to be another camera in there's going to be another camera in about a month or so that everybody's going to go nuts for. And they're going to say, it's the best thing ever, the greatest camera ever. Is this the best video camera? These videos are going to come out. Look, all I'll say is you can come here and you'll get the honest truth, regardless of what camera factory is. You'll always get the truth. You'll get how I feel about it, regardless. But I think I'm gonna think about the closest. Oh, we got one more. Those guys are always up to getting cams, the film cams and cams conventions. They never done a day's work. Totally agree with you, Osme. Any camera these days will give you great footage. It's just about the ecosystem. That basically sums up how I feel about it. Go with your ecosystem. I'm not going to try to sway you to a C70 because I think there's some flaws with the C70. I also think there's some flaws with the FX6. I still don't like the ergonomics of their FX series. I hate like the button layout. It's not conducive. I don't like it. It's one of my things that I always grasp because that's when you can't just grab and touch something real quickly, it slows down. But a lot of people that doesn't bother them. So just go with the ecosystem that you want. I must choose C70 and C200, a better sensor versus RAW. I mean, I will say this. Do you have another? I will say this, Noli. Thanks for joining, man. Do you have another camera that shoots RAW? And then what? The only other thing I would say is, do you really need 4K 120? There's some. See, the thing is, that is this thing with the C200 and the C70. The C200 has RAW, and the RAW makes up a lot of differences. However, it also drains a lot of media for that. With the C70, even though I don't get RAW, I still get better dynamic range. I get better professional features like false colors. I get SDI. I get timecode SDI, a bunch of other different things. So it's sort of, for me, I will tell you right now, because Noli, I own a C200. I am planning to sell my C200. It's just a matter of just getting things situated right. But I am ultimately going to plan to sell my C200 to get the C70, because but also I need to point out that I also still have RAW cameras. I have my R5 if I want to shoot Canon RAW, and I'll get more RAW options once this firmware comes. And then I still got my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 6K, which has Blackmagic RAW. So I have other RAW options. So the RAW is not as prevalent on the C200, even though I would love to have it. I would much rather have a camera that has better dynamic range performance, better low light performance. Even though the codecs are not, The codecs are still better. Even the H.265 or in the different XFAVCs, you still got XFAVC, which is still a better codec than the 8-bit version that's in the C200. I can load LUTs. Again, the list goes on and on. There's just so many more features that are better on the C70 than the C200. But again, I also have other cameras that shoot RAW. So if you don't have a camera that shoot RAW, I don't know what to tell you, man. I almost would say the benefits would work, and I think you would probably appreciate RAW more if you went C70, and then maybe then along the lines you go say to a C300 Mark III or C500, and then use the RAW that way. But the C200 is still a great camera. It's still a fantastic camera. It's just for me, the C70 just makes a better fit for me, and I can only speak for myself regarding that. But hopefully that helps with your question. So okay, I'm gonna wrap. I really need to get going, but I'm gonna wrap this up really quickly. So let me go through everything. Thanks, okay. Thank you, man. Ray, hey, what's up, man? Thanks for joining the live stream. People are overrating RAW. We shot all this time without RAW. Now all these people are acting like RAW is a requirement. Yes, but I would also counteract, Ray, that once you've actually experienced RAW, it's really, really, really... It's like, to me, shooting with RAW is like shooting with built-in NDs. Once you've done it, it is really, really difficult to go back from it. Especially with Canon RAW because of how much control it gives you. Especially if you got a software like DaVinci Resolve, which gives you so much metadata control. I would argue even more metadata control than actually their own Blackmagic RAW. It's not as fast as Blackmagic RAW, but they do give you more control. So you just gotta understand, it is really difficult for someone who is shot RAW, like myself, to move away from it because it is so handy. Is it the end-all be-all? Do you need it? No, Ray, no, you don't. You don't need it. But it's something that you really take notice when you're not using it. And that's all I will say about that. So you have 2 EOS Rs. Okay, so you don't. So yeah. So which probably means you are invested. So Noely, are you invested in? Do you have RF glass that you've invested, or have you? Do you still have? Is most of your lenses EF? I know I keep saying this, but I would definitely want to help you, Noely. So I don't want to just end the stream. I definitely want to see if I can help you out. But do you have RF or do you have EF lenses? Let me know real quickly. Because honestly, that could be the determining factor. Because if it's like, okay, if you have to buy more EF glass, I would say it's probably better to get the C70. Because yes, you're not going to be able to get RAW, but clearly you're not working in a RAW workflow right at this point. I would rather you not have to invest more in glass if you already have a good strong RF ecosystem, then you could just get the C70. But if your ecosystem is EF, then yeah, the C200. Then hey, the C200 may be the option for you. Really? Oh, Marquette. Thanks. Hey, thanks for. Wow, I didn't realize the price difference was that much. Wow. But yeah, because I was looking at it, I was like, it's a $500 price difference. But I didn't realize it was that much of a difference in the. So is the C200 $1,000 more, or is the C70 $1,000 less? Okay, yeah, Ray, I can totally understand it. That makes total sense, Ray. Yeah, if that's the case, again, I agree with you. The 30-minute limit sucks. There's no reason for it. Now, I have made my R5. I've done an interview where it went like 45 minutes. Yeah, I had to admit, once I got closer to that record limit, I had to stop it and record it. Hit press again. That is, especially if I'm planning to be away and maybe if I'm working a system where I have to use my switcher. So that can be cumbersome. So I totally agree, and I totally understand where you're coming from, Ray. So yeah, the 30, and we're all, I think, no matter where, I said this before in my review, no matter where we all sit in regards of how we feel about the R5, everybody agrees the 30-minute record limit is stupid. Canon, you need to get rid of it. So you have EF glass. Okay, if you have EF glass, man, this still makes it hard. I mean, this is still a hard choice. Because I can see the value. Because I would say this: if you are absolutely committed to just using it for quite a period of time, I think the C70 will get you. It'll be a lot more easier to work with. Man, this is tough. Because my thinking is it's about value. Because the C70, look, the C200 it's showing its age, whereas the C70 is using the new sensor type. You know what? I'll tell you, go C70. Go C70, because you can still take advantage of the R. You still get the benefits of, if you want to go RF, you can do it. Since you got two USRs, you're not, even though, yeah, RAW is good, and I love the RAW feature out of it, but the C7, if you're exposing correctly, Noli, as long as you got your exposure, you're doing your white balance, you're doing all that checked, and I'm assuming you're doing that since you got two EOS Rs. The image quality is pretty much identical to 12-bit RAW from the C200, and it's better than the 10-bit RAW out of the C200 when you're shooting 4K 60. So, and you still got the more better professional features. I think it'll just be more familiar if you go with the RF system, since you already have the R. I would say probably the C70, since you're already in that RF mount system. Even though you have EF glass. So yeah. The RAW, yes, the RAW is sweet to work with in terms of the image, but I think you'll just get a better image out of the C70 more than the C200. Oh, man, this was tough. Okay. Yeah, I would say go with the C70. All right, so the Sony is actually $1,413 more than the C70. Interesting. Okay. All right, I have all the Sigma Art Prime lenses and 2 RF lenses. So yeah, I would say personally I would say go with the C70. I thought the tax law expired though. Correct me if I'm wrong, people. If somebody else can agree, I'm pretty sure the tax law expired like a couple years ago. So I don't know why that would still be a thing. If it didn't, then maybe because I remember there was a bunch of reporting that the tax law expired and that they just let it elapse. So there's no reason for the 30-minute record limit anymore. Merrick, I have 5 Sony glasses and I'm still going for the C70. Interesting, Merrick. I would love to hear why you. Let's see. Yeah, I would love to hear, Merrick, why you're going with the C70 over something like the FX6. Yeah. Yeah, that's the reason why so many of the newer cameras, like the GH5S, the S1H, and the A7S, they all don't have record limits because the tax law expired. So there's no reason. Again, there's zero reason for this 30-minute record limit. So yeah, thanks Ray for that. To be honest, I expect Panasonic will drop the real camera. Imagine slightly better camera than A7S with excellent autofocus. They got to prove to me that they're going to do some sort of excellent autofocus. I know they're doing time for flight or fight or flight. Basically, the line art technology. The only issue I have with line art technology is relying on infrared, which can still be hit or miss. It's not really relying on sensor technology, which is what Sony and Canon are doing. So Panasonic still has to prove themselves. I don't know. And again, my problem with Panasonic is they don't have their ecosystem is a mess. Panasonic, I know Trevor is going to disagree with me on this, but their ecosystem is a mess because their crop sensor cameras, their GH5, GH5Ss, are Micro Four Thirds. Their big cinema cameras, their Evo 1s, their Varicams, EF mount or PL mount. And now their mirrorless camera, full frame mirrorless cameras, L mounts. Their ecosystem is all over the place. So while yes, you can get adapters to go to one, unless you are somebody like Canon who builds the adapter, who builds the autofocus system in the camera and the autofocus system in the lens, you're going to get a total mess by going adapters. So that's my biggest issue, is that Panasonic has yet to build a solid ecosystem that can transition from one to the other. Canon's is the reason why Canon's works, even though they're kind of a little bit of a mess too, because I don't know why they still have the M series of lenses for their like small APS-C cameras, and clearly not, because it looks like rumors that they're going to APS-C for the RF mount. But yeah, you got the R. But if you remove that M series and you just go RF and EF, but they build the lens, but they build the whole lens ecosystem, they build the adapter ecosystem, and they build the camera. So they still work. They understand the sense, and they build the sensors in their cameras that use a dual pixel autofocus. So they can all. It's easier for the transition to talk with one another. It's different when you're relying on other people's systems. Panasonic has to rely on Leica's mount system, and then they have to work about their camera bodies. And even if it's their cameras, they still have to work all together. And then if you decide to try to go EF, well, now you got to try to go work with Canon to make their EF systems glass work. So that's my only issue with Panasonic. And that's been my biggest gripe with them since they've gone full frame, is that they don't have a strong ecosystem. Their lens lineup is like slow, kind of like Nikon's. Their lens roadmap is very slow. Sony already has a strong ecosystem of lenses and cameras, and then Canon is just coming out like next year. I mean, I don't know how much of this is true, but next year, 2021, they got a insane amount of lenses that they have ready to go in the pipeline. So, yeah, as Trevor says, all indications are that Panasonic really has no interest in AF. Micro Four Thirds isn't going anywhere. Panasonic took it, heavily invested in it. It makes too many sales. There's no incentive to change that, and they won't. Normally, I still, for the most part, agree with you, Trevor. The only thing is, look, with this whole COVID really changed a lot of that. And now with so many people camera sales in the camera industry was already like nosediving like crazy. So now with COVID and people are like not spending as much, you're not generating enough revenue. Now you have to sort of figure out, well, where's your R&D going to go to? So yeah, the Micro Four Thirds is, for the longest time, yes, that's they're heavily invested, but from the looks of it, it just seems like they're still going to I think they're going to do it for like another year or two, but I think eventually they're going to realize we can't keep splitting these two ecosystems up. Canon's starting to realize this. That's why they've really stopped building EF lenses, and they're now making the transition to the RF mount. Eventually, Panasonic is going to realize we can't really do this. So we're going to and they're going to be, and I personally believe they're eventually going to have to make a choice between Micro Four Thirds and full frame, and their full frame L mount. I don't know what they'll do, but we'll see. Yeah, the Pocket 4K definitely picked it up. And look, Pocket 4K picked it up, Blackmagic picked it up, Zcam picked it up. I mean, but look, Olympus was in it for a long time. And eventually Olympus went out of business. I just think, especially since a lot of things are going for larger sensors, I think more people I think it's interesting to see where it will go. Micro Four Thirds isn't going to go anywhere for a while, but I think it will have a slow death. I think it will have a slow death, because you're still getting small bodies with full frames and and APS-C Super 35 cameras. And so the benefits of Micro Four Thirds is not really as beneficial to me as it was before. But we'll see. Yeah. I know. Yeah, I know quite a bit of people as well, and that's true. Like a lot of people that go older that just basically just want to, um, they don't want to carry a lot, and I totally get that. It's just, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, especially with this whole new world, especially with so many terms of limits of terms of development right now. It will be interesting to see what companies will do. Uh, it's interesting times in terms of that. Okay. Wow, we went another 30 minutes. Uh, no, I totally agree. I think, no, there is, trust me, there's a lot of people, like one of my best friends, he still has a GH5, a GH5S, and a Pocket 4K. By the way, all those cameras were my cameras. I just sold it to him. But no, he's totally invested in the Micro Four Thirds system, even though he still has the speed boosts. But he does like but he does like the ecosystem. There's a ton of people that like the ecosystem. It's more to me about, is there going to be enough? Are these people that have multiple mounts, multiple ecosystems like Panasonic? Are they going to be able to sustain the development cycles for both of them? I don't know if especially for someone like Panasonic. Blackmagic, most of their money is in the big broadcasting. And so is Panasonic. Panasonic is in broadcasting as well. But again, I don't know if they will. We'll see. But but this stream has been going on for a while, and I am going to call it here. Hopefully, Noli, I was able to help you out with that. Again, that's just my suggestion. I would tell you, Noli, definitely, just do your own research and just go with, honestly, at the end of the day, go with what your gut feeling says. I've given my advice, so hopefully it's helpful, but at the end of the day, I would say just make sure at the end of the day it's something that you're accepting. But thank you guys for joining me on this stream. I really, really do appreciate it. This has been a wonderful talk. Keep an eye out. Again, keep an eye out. Me and Gaston are going to be doing our discussion videos. I don't know when it's going to be released, but hopefully we can start filming that tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. And I got more content coming. But until next time, take care.